Good morning, Flosstube, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever time it happens to be when you stumble across this video. I guess I could just say welcome. This is my first Flosstube video, and before I go any further, I do want to apologize for the very strange angle of it. I realize that when you're speaking to people, it's more polite to look them in the eye, but I'm kind of a private person, which of course begs the question what I'm doing with this video that I hope to post to YouTube, but maybe we will or won't get into that later. I have seen other Flosstubers very successfully post videos where they're looking down on their projects. I think to do that, though, I would need to have a phone or a tablet of my own or a camera. I don't have any of those things. What I have is the webcam in this computer. So that's what I need to use, and it's not that I don't like y'all, but I'm very, very aware of the fact that anything I film and put on YouTube is actually out there for quite a large portion of the planet to see if they felt like it, and I'm just not that public a person. I'm not even sure how difficult it will be for people to find this video, because I'm not a social media person either. I am not on YouTube. I don't do Instagram. I'm sorry, I will be on YouTube, I hope. I'm not on Facebook. I don't do Instagram. I don't participate in the cross-stitch forums, and yet here I am. I guess I might get into that in a minute. I am feeling really nervous talking with the camera on. Talking to myself is not hard. Talking with the camera on is turning knots in my stomach. So why am I here? Well, if you do stumble across this video and don't know what Flosstube is, that's pretty amazing. But Flosstube is kind of an online gathering of people who love cross-stitch. That's what this is all about. And they post videos to share their enthusiasm for cross-stitch with one another. And those videos can consist of almost anything stitching related, but most often involve talking about their works in progress or showing pieces they've finished, showing materials that they have on hand that they've acquired over time, showing materials that they just got, their newest acquisitions, talking about tips, tools, and techniques, showing how they store materials, showing how they do things, what they use to get their projects done, talking about their fabrics, talking about their threads, talking about the history of how they came to cross-stitch. It can be almost anything. My only plan for today is to show my works in progress, and the reason I'm leaping so far out of my comfort zone to do this is because it's really fun if you're a stitcher to know that there are other stitchers out there and to see their work. I came across Flosstube first in May of this year, 2016, and it was while I was kind of hunting online in hopes of finding that there were more people cross-stitching than I was afraid there were. It all ties back into something I'll talk about when I show you my first project. But as I was hunting online to see some signs of life in cross-stitch, because it seems to have died down a lot since I first started, will be 18 years in September. There's a lot less out there physically in the stores. As I was looking for those signs of life, I did come across an interesting report about cross-stitch, which confirmed some of my suspicions. Let me put this down so I can just talk to you in a normal way and get my notes up here. One of my suspicions was that most cross-stitchers are getting kind of old, so I thought of myself aging away in my room by myself cross-stitching, and that was a sad thought. So I looked online and found a report from an interesting group. I think they're the National Needlework Association, if I'm remembering their name correctly. I did very recently get a book that they published, How to Embroider, includes how to cross-stitch, and you can see their name there. They are, in fact, the National Needlework Association, and they have some reports online that's mostly for retailers, but some of the older reports are available for the public to look at for free, and so I looked, and the 2013 report is the most recent one that the public can have any access to, and you can look at the summary there, and it said that the average age of cross-stitch enthusiasts was 56. That's even older than I am now, let alone in 2013, although I'm getting up there. So that didn't actually inspire me with a lot of hope for the craft. The reason I want to know that there are more cross-stitchers is because I want the materials and things that interest me to be available, and if everybody stops doing it, they won't be anymore. I had wild ideas going through my head like, gee, how could you find some young hot celebrity to show a public interest in cross-stitch so that everybody will start cross-stitching so that there'll be supplies available for you? I mean, weird thoughts go through my head all the time. But in my search, eventually I found Flosstube, and it's amazing, it's wonderful, it's great fun to watch and to see that there really are people out there who like cross-stitch and enjoy it enough to put themselves out in front of the public this way with YouTube. Many of the ones who do it, not surprisingly, are younger rather than older, because that's kind of the way social media goes. Sorry about the ums, I was planning to avoid those. There are a lot of younger floss tubers, and the projects that they choose may not be the kinds that I would choose, but it's still fun to watch them and to see how excited they are about what they're doing. And I kind of wanted to give back. That's what all of this is about. Many of the floss tubers look like they're having amazing fun. So if I was a little bit more of a public persona, I'd do this to join in on the fun. It's like seeing a party, and you want to get in on the party. I can't say I'm a party animal, but I do want to put out some more content there. The more content there is for Flosstube, the more there is for people to watch. So here I am, and I better get into those works in progress before you all give up on me. I have 7 of them to show you, and they relate back to a resolution I made at the beginning of this year to finish all of my works in progress and unfinished projects. I thought at the time that maybe there would be 7 or 8 of them. It turned out, when I pulled them all together, there were 13, which to some floss tubers is a joke because they have more than that on the go at any given time. But to me, that was overwhelming. I felt the mental weight, the mental burden of having all those projects unfinished, and it impacts me. It shouldn't have to. I mean, that's all on me. It's not like that's a normal thing. But it impacts me in the sense that I don't want to start new projects that I might love because I'm so aware that I have that unfinished stuff. So I pulled them all together, and I have made progress this year. I began in January, and of the 13, there are only 4 left. I should say, though, that some of those 13 were nearly finished anyway. 5 of them had all their stitching in, they just hadn't become fully finished objects. But of the 8 remaining, 4 of them had to be stitched first. I took care of that, and they're fully finished objects now. So I'm just going to show you to begin the 4 remaining from my New Year's resolution, and then I will get on with 3 others that somehow managed to get started. As of late May, early June, they started popping out of the woodwork. I told you that my resolution was because I felt the mental weight of unfinished things. As the weight lifted, the starts broke through. So the first one I'm going to show you is a bit of a cheat. This is not cross-stitch. You'll know that as soon as you see it. This is needlepoint. It is, however, a stitching-related project. It is also definitely a long-neglected project. I started this thing, well, I was working on it 16 years ago, and it hasn't had a stitch put in it since. Why would I do that? Well, because after having started cross-stitch, as I said, almost 18 years ago, I saw a few kits in my shopping that were needlepoint that I just really, really, really liked, but there was no equivalent in cross-stitch for them, and I wanted to be able to do them, and I picked them up. It's only a handful, and I thought, well, I need to learn how to needlepoint so that I could do those. This was my Learn How to Needlepoint project. It's small. It's meant to just teach me how the stitching is done so that I could move on to other things. Obviously, that hasn't really happened. What it is a kit from Bucilla, and I know I brought in the information on it. It's here somewhere. I have my little yarns in a separate box that I'm working with. You can see that needlepoint is done on a canvas rather than a fabric for you floss tubers who may not be totally familiar with it. The colors are often pre-printed on the canvas, but that's not necessary. You can do needlepoint from a blank canvas, and I tried to find a blank canvas today to show you because I know I have one, but I couldn't come up with that. What I did come up with was a bag with some of the yarns and things. You can get yarns, wools, you can do it with floss too, for needlepoint, and start with a blank canvas and do whatever design you want. This one, as I was saying, is a Bucilla kit. I'm going to set it down for a minute so I can show you some of the particulars. It is as old as the date that you saw on it. I keep most of the floss here on a floss fly. Not floss, this is definitely yarn, it's wool. And this is the front of the kit from long, long ago. I don't even know where that store is anymore. that's what it's supposed to look like when it's done. And according to the kit, it will be a 7x5 piece. It's on a 12 mesh interlock canvas. They measure needlepoint a little differently from cross stitch. It is done with Persian wool yarn. It had a gold-plated needle, but when I was pulling things together here to show you, I think I lost my needle. I'm going to be unhappy. I might have to get my magnet wand in here and try to find it. It dates back to 1998, and it was designed by Barbara Baatz of the Cooler Design Studio. And I'm struggling with it a bit because needlepoint and cross-stitch are definitely not the same. For one thing, the charts are pretty different. I have the instructions and such here, and I know that we're not supposed to show total charts online, but I wanted to give you like a little peekaboo hint of part of the chart, if I may. And I kind of got myself a little card to block out the majority of the chart so that we're not giving away too much. But what you can see there is that it's not graph-like, like a cross-stitch design. Instead, everything is numbers and symbols and sort of areas blocked out like some kind of strange map. And so your needlepoint is mapped for you. It also obviously is printed on the canvas, but to work it, you can't always line up the squares of it with the printing, and that gets a little confusing, and that's where the chart comes in, is you can look at the chart and try to make sure that your stitches are landing in the right spot in relation to one another. Also, needlepoint is not worked with cross stitches. There's so many different stitches for needlepoint, an amazing number of stitches. This one is done in continental stitch, and that's important to know because it's one of 3 basic tent stitches for needlepoint. I don't know much about needlepoint. Obviously, if I haven't finished this in 16 years, that's telling you something. But I do have a book on it. I'm a real book person. So let me show you where some of my information on this came from. I have a wonderful book. You can't get it in front of the camera. The Needlepoint Book. A complete update of the classic guide. This is so old now, who knows? By Joe Appolito Christensen. And it told me about the different tent stitches. You have the half cross stitch, which, as you can probably figure out, works like a cross stitch. Starts at the bottom, goes to the top, then you start immediately below the top of your first stitch in the next square. It's just half stitches. Her recommendation for the best one is basket weave, but this kit came with continental recommended, and that's important because half cross, for example, uses way less yarn or floss or whatever your thread is than continental does. And before you begin a design, if it's a kit especially, or if you're kitting one up, you need to know how much yarn you're going to need. So what happens is, I'm going to show you the back of my horrible messy thing. As you do needlepoint, you don't have a lot of vertical stitches like you would have with half cross or with cross stitching. Instead, you're building up fabric because of the way the stitches are happening. And I am told and have read in more than one place that continental stitch can distort the canvas. I don't know if that's happening with my piece, but I know that continental stitch is safe to do with this one because it's the stitch that was recommended for this kit. So even though I haven't worked on that in forever, it is part of my resolution. That's why I showed it to you today. It may come up again, and I'm sorry that it wasn't cross-stitch. You're going to find out that that's true for the next one of my works in progress also. And again, I'm only showing it to you because of my resolution. That means if I do manage to do another video, it will show up again. The question of another video is a little bit in doubt, even this one is, because my computer is nagging me to upgrade to Windows 10, and I don't know what will happen to my movie making abilities when that happens. I have my doubts. Anyway, the next of my works in progress that's part of the resolution is embroidery. Now, I told you I started the needlepoint piece because I saw other needlepoint kits I wanted to do, and it was supposed to be a learning piece. I have less excuse than that for this one. I will show you the package so you can see kind of what it's supposed to look like when it's done. And another reason for showing you that, in spite of the glare, sorry, is that this is kind of what inspired me. Is I've seen this before. As a child, somewhere in somebody's house, not our own, probably other little old ladies, I don't know, they had embroidery designs of this sort, little flowers, little birds in small hoops hanging on the wall. It looked like a very interesting sort of thing. Cool. But I didn't know how to do it. I never imagined I would do it. Never occurred to me to do it until I was visiting my sister when she was living in a certain place, and she took me to the craft chain store that they had in that state. which we now have in our state, but we didn't have it then. And while we were looking, I found some counted cross-stitch kits, but I also found this little embroidery kit. And I went ahead and picked it up because I thought it would be interesting. And I'm not very far on the little bird, but I'm a lot farther than I was before my resolution. I am terrible at embroidery. I don't know what I'm doing. All I got done when I was visiting her is this top large flower with its stem and one of the two small flowers with it, I forget which. The rest I've added since I started my resolution in January. Mine is not looking like the picture much. I like his little feet. I think those turned out okay. But for example, in his tail, they definitely in the directions have both straight stitch and back stitch recommended in different places, and they said do back stitch to separate the black sections of his tail. But mine look like little dotted lines, and the ones in the picture look solid. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. Also, when it calls for something like satin stitch, I was doing okay. I can handle satin stitch. Not great. You can see it's not pretty. But things like long and short stitch, especially in tiny areas like these flower tops, I'm not sure how to do. I look online, I see the tutorials. I just can't get it to make sense in little bitty areas like this. Even in this flower, which had a lot of long and short, I was struggling. Some parts are fine. I do French knots fine. There's French knots in the center there. There were some French knots up here. It will have more back stitching and stuff in it. But these little areas on the bird, most of them are long and short, and I'm not sure how you do something like that in such a tiny area. Obviously, it can be done. It's not weird. I have here a proof. This is not mine. I didn't make it. I found it among either my mother's or grandmother's things. I don't remember which. But it's this little embroidered handkerchief that I think somebody must have given them at some point in time. And he's got long and short stitch the way embroidery is supposed to look, and he's tiny. If I put him back here and compare him to the bird I'm doing, my bird is gargantuan compared to this little guy. You could swallow him whole, but I'm struggling just to do mine, and somebody long ago did this other little one. So embroidery can be done. It can even be done on a tiny little scale. I told you I'm a book person, so I have my proof here. There's a book I picked up called Teeny Tiny Menagerie, and everything in here is little bitty embroidered things. So people do embroider on a very small scale. I'm just not very good at it. I need to figure out how it's done. So that is my second work in progress that may come back to haunt any future videos I do, provided there's progress on it. I will not be showing them in a video again if there's nothing been done to them, like the needlepoint that hasn't had a stitch in 16 years. But as long as I make progress, I'll show it to you. My third work in progress for the floss tubers out there, I'm happy to say, is finally a actual cross stitch piece. However, it's not counted cross stitch. Instead, what we have here is stamped cross stitch. And whereas the needlepoint was started because I wanted to learn needlepoint, and the embroidery was started because I was on a trip and kind of needed something to stitch and saw one of those little embroidery kits like I'd seen as a child. By the way, I do want to backtrack to give you just one insight. You'll probably get a number into the strange way my mind works. I told you I needed to get my whips and projects done to free up my mind to do other new projects. I was stuck on that embroidery for the longest time because I am so awful at it. But recently, I can't remember if it was just before or just after my resolution started, I found a kit that had 4 little hooped embroidered things, flowers and birds. And you might be saying, why did you do that when you haven't even finished the one you've been working on for 10 years? One of them was the same little bird. And the way my mind works is, if I mess up the bird I'm doing now, I have a backup copy. I have another piece of fabric with the same design on it, and the materials, and the little hoop, and I'm free to do him badly. Which I am. I'm doing him very badly, but I'm free to do him badly, because I can always do the other one. And that makes me feel a lot better. Now with stamped cross stitch, unless you go out and buy another kit, of course you don't have that option. This particular stamped cross stitch piece may be my oldest work in progress. I told you the needlepoint hadn't had a stitch put in it in 16 years. Well, this is pretty darn old also. It's a wedding record, and I got it because for some strange reason I thought the intended recipient would like it. It was not meant as a wedding gift, not at all. I made something else entirely different for the wedding, but it was meant to be a gift eventually as a record of the marriage, and the marriage took place 17 and a half years ago. I don't remember exactly when I bought this, sometime after I started stitching, nearly 18 years ago. I don't remember if it was before or after the wedding that I got it, because like I said, it wasn't intended as a wedding gift. But I can show you what I have. It is another Bucilla kit that I got in a store. You can tell from the yellow sticker it was on clearance. That was one of the temptations to buy it. I thought that the recipient would like this stained glass design. I had hesitation in buying it because of it being stamped. Stamped cross stitches, some of you may know if you've ever tried it, leaves it kind of difficult to make your X's neat. I don't know, it's just different all around. By the way, the little embroidered bird, I work in a hoop. Unlike the stretcher bars that were on the needlepoint, here's the hoop that I use for my little embroidered bird. I also use a hoop for this counted cross stitch. And this is what it looks like so far. I have only the top done. It's beginning to actually maybe look a little bit like stained glass. I don't know, it's kind of washed out in the camera, I see. But there's a long way to go. I've barely started that thing. When my resolution began, all I had done was some of the gray on the edges, on the sides, and one of the pink, parts of the pink on one of the flowers, and some of the yellow. It's hard to tell now because it blends into the blue of the stamping, but I have done some of the turquoise and blue of the windows, a little bit of purples up here. It's come along, there's not much, but the resolution has helped. These are the first stitches put in this thing in I don't know how long. Long time. So having my resolution is useful, and you may be seeing the counted cross stitch again. I almost pulled out, stamped cross stitch. I almost pulled out one of my other stamped cross stitch pieces. They're not my favorite. I was given the impression when I first started stitching from a friend that stamped cross stitch is sort of the unwanted stepchild of the cross stitch world, in part because of the fabrics I think that it's on. It isn't just that it's messier, but they tend not to be the greatest of material that they stamp these things on. If you stamp your own, if you do your own transfers, that's different. But if you're trying to do, for example, pillowcases, which I've done a couple of times, we're not talking 400 thread count Egyptian cotton here. You're going to put a lot of hours of work into something that's going to be kind of cheesy material when you're done. So that's one argument against stamped cross stitch. I also find that my back on this one with all the color changes is just not the same. It's pretty messy. I'm just not enjoying it as much, and I'm worried with that particular one that I may run out of thread, especially with this gray, because I'm not even halfway down the side. This one is getting close to the halfway point here with the gray. And I've got all of the edge left to go, and I feel like the thread's disappearing pretty fast. That is one odd thing about this Bucilla kit, is the threads I think you had to separate them yourself, I can't remember. But they give the colors and the number of yards you should have of each, just like many cross-stitch kits do. But some of the numbers and the colors seem to exactly match DMC threads. So that there are a couple colors here that if I ran out of them, I think I could pull out DMC and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. On the other hand, there are other thread colors in this that have numbers that don't even exist in the DMC universe. So I don't know where they come from or what color they're supposed to be or whether I could ever match them. So it does worry me. I don't want to run out of those. Okay, so that was 3 of my works in progress. I'm afraid this video is going on a long time, and I'm sorry about that. The next one that I want to show you is actual counted cross stitch. In fact, everything from now on is counted cross stitch. So if you sat through this much of the video, thank you. I'm going to show you counted cross stitch now. Everything from now on will be counted cross stitch. Pardon me, my nose is getting a little drippy. This is a counted cross stitch piece. Obviously, I'm working it on a frame. It's on 14 count, I think, antique white, Aida. It doesn't actually say in the kit what color they provided with it. You can see it's going to be a scenic piece. And it is the last of the pieces that are part of my New Year's resolution, which might lead one to ask, why did it take you so long to get around to finishing this one? Well, because this was kind of my relief piece. I'm tired of working on all this other stuff. Can't I stitch a real cross stitch now piece? It was also a bit of a decoy. You see, I was working on a gift for a relative for the longest time. Working is a term that should be used loosely. I haven't been working on any stitching steadily for quite some time. I would pick it up and do it in the summer sometimes. But the majority of the projects that I have finished, probably 3 to 1, have been gifts, and they were done almost entirely within, say, the first 10 years of my stitching, because of this stupid MMORPG that my relatives and friends and I are in and have been in for years. I don't know how many years we've been playing the dumb thing, but it eats up so many hours of your time. Anyway, when I was stitching at all, I was stitching a gift, and when that relative for whom I was making it would come to visit, I wanted a decoy piece, something so that, given in our phone conversations and things, I would say, what have you been doing? Oh, I've been stitching. I would have something laying around that would be, sort of this must be what she was stitching. Yes, I'm wiggling it around. I kind of talk with my hands. When it wasn't what I was stitching at all. I was stitching a gift that I had to hide away in a bag and shove in a closet whenever my relative came. So I finally finished that. That was part of my resolution. I wanted to show you a picture, but I don't have a picture of it, and it has been gifted and it's gone now. But this little decoy piece had almost nothing on it when the resolution began. What it had was a little bit of this mast and a little bit of this sail, maybe a little bit of the green. I'm not sure. Not much at all, not much to make anybody think I'd been spending a lot of time stitching, but it was all I had. And since the resolution began, I have obviously gotten to a lot more of it. I'm not showing you a picture of the finished one because I think it's kind of fun to try to figure out what's going to come next, what's going to go into this image. There will be some back stitching. This is a piece called the Sampan. It's from Needle Treasures. It's pretty old. I don't know how old, but the finished size is supposed to be 10 inches by 14 inches. They show it pictured in an 18-inch by 14-inch frame. It, as I said, was 14 count Aida, so you can kind of do a stitch count from that if you want to do some math there. It's nice. I'm not sure where I was going with that. I was telling you where it came from. I didn't want to show you the final picture because I think you can figure things out. We have this jungle, this very hazy looking little jungle. We have the hut that will have some back stitching to give it some definition. We have the little fellow with his boat. I think that might be the Sampan of the name. He will have stitching in his little coat and around the edges of his boat, and he has a pole that he's punting with. We have this big boat, and it's not nearly finished. Let me find the right side of the picture. Not nearly finished. There's another small sail like this at the back. You can see the start of it here. There's a huge sail in the middle that goes all the way up to the skyline and is really wide. Okay, then there's more mountains back here. There's more sunset. There will be some half stitching that I haven't put in yet. This is all full crosses on the mountains, but as you go down, it's going to dissolve into half stitching in all of this area. And it's a very stylized piece. I like that. That's not actually my normal thing. That was another reason I was stitching it. It was my relief piece from all the things that I hadn't finished that I needed to get done. Many of which the problem was that I didn't have the skills to finish them yet. I don't sew, and they needed to be sewn into an ornament, or whatever the problem might have been. I did get those done. Some of them were embroidered. Some of it was stamped cross-stitch with embroidery. There was a lot of different things, and they're done. They're taken care of, other than the ones I just showed you. But this was a break also because the design is much more simplified and stylized than what I normally do. I'm usually into very realistic things, and this one is stylized instead. I also, although I don't have many kits along that line, have something of a fondness for some Asian art. This is obviously, Americanized imitation Asian, like almost all of our cross-stitch kits are. But my parents at one time were stationed in Japan, and our home, before I was ever born, and brought home a number of pieces of art, from silk screens to prints to bric-a-brac and lacquer bowls and, you name it, masks. that were all Japanese, and so I kind of grew up with some of that aesthetic and really liked it. And this is not Japanese at all. From the name, one would presume it's Chinese, but I always, for some reason, think of Vietnam when I see it. I don't know why. I've never been there. But I chose it because of the Asian aesthetic and the stylized nature of it. It looked like something that would be easy to stitch, and in fact it's grown enormously since I finished the other projects in my resolution, because it is counter cross stitch. That's why the needlepoint and the embroidery and the stamped cross stitch are not growing, because I have things like this instead that I like much better. I don't know how old it is when I started it, at least a couple of years, but I wasn't working on it steadily, as I said, because of the dumb video game. One thing I can say about this, I have a comment on it, is that if you are interested in the Sampan by Needle Treasures, I don't know if it's still available, but I'm pretty sure there's probably a pirated copy out there somewhere, because I looked online to see if anyone had stitched this and put an image up just so I could see it finished, and I saw an image of the entire chart. And it's not a small chart. The chart is bigger than the picture. The chart is almost 2 feet wide, between 23 and 24 inches wide. And the chart was pictured online, which is not good news. That tells me somebody has probably pirated the thing. And it may be imitation Asian, but it could be coming to you in pirated form from some enterprising Asian nation at this moment. I don't know. Anyway, mine's the original, and I like it. And it's coming along nicely, and if I do future videos, you'll see more of it. Okay, so if I have 4 that are supposed to be done this year, why would I have any more than that? Well, this weird thing started happening. When the mental weight got lifted, I wanted to stitch more. Well, it wasn't just that. It was that I went shopping for things to help me finish my other projects. That's when I found out there's not as much in the stores anymore as I was used to seeing long ago. In fact, maybe I should mention at this point, I started cross-stitching because of a kit I saw in a chain store that had opened in our community, and that store remained only a very few years because the corporate powers that be decided our city was not profitable enough and they closed it, and it was a good decade or more, easily, well over a decade, before we got any more chain stores back in our town. So there were years, many years, where I didn't get to see what was going on in the stitchy world very well. And now, within the last couple of years, 2 more of those chain stores did open here, different chain, but one of them's really tiny, the other one isn't. And I went there to try to find things to help me out, and one of the things I found was some fabric that I thought I could practice embroidery on. And I found a remnant, because I'm cheap, and I brought the remnant home, and I pulled it out to look at it to see if it would work for my plan of learning to do maybe better long and short stitch or something on the embroidery, and I noticed that it was 55% linen and 45% rayon. And I said, if that was linen and cotton, that would be a real stitching linen. That would be like Quaker cloth or something. I wonder if that store has actual linen. I bet they don't sell Aida off the bolt, but I can ask. So I went and looked, and no, they don't sell Aida off the bolt, but they did have linen. And so I found myself buying, it happened to be on sale, some linen. This is apparel linen, folks. And this is not actually the piece I bought. This is a later piece that I got for some other projects. The piece of apparel linen I got, I brought home immediately. I'll come back to this one later. I think this is 40 count. But I brought it home, and I had a free pattern, and I thought, I wonder if you can really stitch on this remnant that I got. It says it's 100% linen. I took it over to the shelf before I bought it where the actual cross-stitch linens were hanging, and compared the bolt of apparel linen to the packages of linen, and I thought, this is so much similar. I don't see why you couldn't use this, even though it's made for clothes. So I brought it home and hacked off a piece. Sorry that I hacked it off instead of measuring carefully, and began stitching on it. And yes, I know I was supposed to be doing my works in progress and my resolution pieces, but I had to find out whether this linen would work. And before I knew it, I had a little thing stitched up and said, this would be a great gift for Father's Day. This was at the end of May that I started this, and I said, Father's Day isn't that far away. I could finish this for Father's Day. And yeah, I did. I had to borrow this morning, but this is what I stitched up. Little trilobites. The one I started with is on this end, And I was smart enough to know I needed to leave room on my hacked off piece of fabric to fit the other two. But, yeah, they all fit. Mostly. I didn't center them vertically when I started, so you will see some ribbon at the top and bottom of this piece that I added later with hemming tape so that I could lengthen or widen the piece in order to get it, laced onto the backing board and everything. And after I had done the first one over here, I thought, I bet they make a triple picture photo frame so that I could do the other two. Let me pull them back a little so you can see them a little more. And I went shopping, and at our local Walmart, sure enough, I found a triple photo frame. And I measured really carefully for these other two guys so that they would be centered in the windows of the frame. I didn't measure the fabric to start with and get it right up and down, but I did measure side to side, having already hacked off a piece. And it stitches up fine. I have no idea what count it is. I tried to measure as I stitch, and I would come up with really weird numbers like 19 stitches to the inch. This was 2/2, by the way. And yeah, it's like any linen. It has little slubs in it, and sometimes the threads are not of equal width from each other and that sort of stuff. But it doesn't seem to have hurt my trilobites any. I think they're very handsome trilobites. I don't see any problems with them. This was a free pattern online, by the way. If I can figure out how to upload this or anything else, I will definitely try to give credit to the lady that did these. But, yeah, that was my apparel linen, and it worked fine. So that kind of burst the dam and started letting the water out, because getting so many of my projects done, having 9 of them finished and only 4 left, and then opening the floodgates for that little trilobite piece, yeah, I found myself kitting things up, shopping, which I shouldn't have been doing, and of course one thing led to another, and I have some starts. So I have 3 more things to show you, and they are my starts. I'm going to begin with one that's been waiting a long, long time to get stitched, that I kitted up. It was one of 9 that I kitted up at the same time. It's Birds of a Feather. I don't know if with the glare because of this very shiny chart thing, if you can see them. But it's like little chickadee sort of birds and little blue titsers. I don't know what they are. I'm not sure if it says what they are. Cute little birds. I like birds. And they're in here. The designer's, the artist, I guess, is McClung. I don't know if she designed this particular one or someone else did. There's notes in here from the company that designed it. And they're very pretty. I think. That's just me personally. It says Catherine McClung Incorporated. She's definitely the artist. I don't know if she charted it. And so I started one, but one reason I started him, I had good excuses. I started it because I wanted to try out a new frame. While kitting up all those other things, I thought, I'm going to need more frames than I have. I don't have enough frames to do all these pieces that I'm kitting up. They're not the right sizes and stuff that they're going to require. The other things I showed you, the only one on a frame so far, was my Sampan, which you can see is on a scroll frame. It's a cheap Edmunds brand scroll frame from long, long ago. I think it's about a 24-inch, if I recall correctly. Well, I needed another frame for some of these other pieces. So I saw a Flosstuber, yes, Flosstubers, it's your fault, who had recently purchased an Edmunds handy clamp frame and had nice things to say about it. So I thought, I'm going to try that. And I ordered the set. And the first thing they told me when I got it and opened the package was you need to get cotton batting to protect the plastic things from leaving creases in your fabric. But this is actually the start of those little birds. Not very much. I didn't even try to do very much. There's not a lot to show there because that was just really to try out the frame so that I could see if I liked it, and if so, order more frames of the same sort, which I did. I have some more frames now. Unfortunately, they didn't come large enough for the largest things that I kitted up. I needed a 30 and 36-inch frame for the largest ones, and I have not started those. I'm not completely insane, but they had to come from a different brand. In this brand, this is a 20-inch, which is perfect for, say, your standard 15 by 18-inch fabric cut, which is what this is. This is Oatmeal Aida. I got 16 count rather than 14 count for this one because I wanted it to be able to fit on there. And all you have is a little bit of branch, a little bit of a berry. That shows you that I'm doing the top birds first. I know you really can't see those well, there's just too much glare. But the little gray birds with the berries is what's coming first. And you can tell from this also that I start in the center of a piece when I'm stitching. So the center was actually on the edge of that berry. And then I moved up to the branch because it's easier to stitch the branches. And not much there, but it's a nice frame, and that's a work in progress. And Birds of a Feather by Catherine McClung. You may or may not see more of that soon. Okay, the last two. And then I have something I want to ask for your help with. But let me show you the other two pieces. Now, the way my mind works is pretty strange. I hope the camera didn't go out just then, because the screen went dark, but that may not mean problems for the camera. My mind is a pretty strange mind. I've already told you one or two things that are odd about it, like not being able to start new projects when I'm weighted down by too many old ones, and feeling that I could do my embroidery because I had a second copy in case I messed up. Another thing that I had a habit of doing was if I did start something new, it would be in some way, to my mind, inconsequential. Small, unimportant. If I spend, quarter of an hour doing this little thing, it's not really taking away from the thing I'm supposed to be doing. Which, of course, is complete BS, because that's 15 minutes on that little project that you could have spent on the important project. It's a little bit like saying, if I take this dish out of the cupboard and wash it, I'm not really taking away time from doing all the windows that have to be cleaned. The windows may be a bigger project, but you didn't have to take the dish out of the cupboard. So any little project you start that isn't the big project you should be doing, or the important project, doesn't have to be large, but maybe there's a deadline on it, maybe it's a gift, whatever. Anything you start is not inconsequential. But my mind, the way it works, I can fool myself that way and say, go ahead, go for it, do this little thing. So a lot of the things that finally got finished up were things like a bookmark that I couldn't figure out how to do the backing on it, or little ornaments that I didn't know how to sew into cushions because I don't sew, or a towel that was stamped cross stitch that had to be embroidered also, so part of it was just getting the stitching done, but it had to be hemmed, and I don't hem, so I had to go online and learn how to hem stitch, things like that. Lots of little things that had hung around for a long time. But this next one I thought was inconsequential, so I could start it. Why is it inconsequential? Well, I think it popped up after I kitted Birds of a Feather, but before the frame for Birds of a Feather arrived, so I hadn't actually started Birds of a Feather. I had done the trilobites that I showed you that opened the floodgates. So the thing that made this inconsequential was several things. First of all, it's a store brand kit that I had never tried before and didn't know if they were any good. I had at least one large kit of theirs I wanted to do, and I didn't know whether it was worth spending the money on. So having this little one, if I tried it out, I could find out what I was going to think of their kits, of their cloth, of their threads, of their charts, of all of it. Also, it's sort of the style that I like, but not as realistic as what I like. There was part of the design I didn't care for. And again, this is where fellow Flosstubers help me, because you guys just change things when you don't like them. I change things when they need fixing if I notice that they've charted a color wrong or something. But I don't normally change their designs. In this case, I thought, that part of it that's kept me from buying it because I didn't like it, I'll just change it. It's also inconsequential because it's small. It's a full coverage piece, but it's only 5x7. It's inconsequential because I have many much better bird charts than this. It was inconsequential because it was on clearance. All these things came together for me to say, you have permission to do this. So I did. And it wasn't just me. The last probably straw that broke this camel's back was seeing another Flosstuber do it. I do remember who that was. That's She's Craftin'. She was doing this one, and I had already considered it many times. And when I saw she was doing it, it's like, that's that little bird I keep looking at. The little bird I want to do and can't bring myself to do. This little robin. And the part that I don't like, by the way, is his eye. They gave him eyelashes, or her, but it's got a red breast. It might be the him. Anyway, they gave this bird eyelashes. You can see that in the inset down there in the corner. Birds don't have eyelashes. No bird I ever met had eyelashes. I had ducks. I had 17 ducks. They didn't have any eyelashes that I noticed. We had a parakeet that the cat brought home. I don't remember that parakeet having eyelashes, and we had it for 11 years. We had a swallow that fell out of his nest, and we raised him up and turned him loose when he was grown. I don't remember eyelashes, and I had to feed him by hand, little strips of hamburger and egg. We had a pigeon that got beat up by other pigeons, so my sister brought it home and we raised that up. I don't remember any eyelashes on that bird either. I have bird books. I don't remember any eyelashes. That is just weird. So, I have changed that little part a bit. It's not finished, but let me show you what I've done with my little bird. My little clearance priced, cheap kit, trashy floss, can't be important, it's okay to do him, bird that I gave myself permission to work on. You can see I started in the center, that's what I usually do, but because he was full coverage, I was thinking the best thing to do is work from the top down. That's always recommended because according to the advice out there, if you work from the top down as you make a new stitch, you're coming up most of the time in an empty hole and going down in a filled hole. And coming up in an empty hole, you're not disturbing your floss. And going down in a filled hole, you're helping to tuck in the previous floss. So you work top down is recommended as being the best thing. So having done the middle, I thought I'm going to count up to the top because he's full coverage and I want to do him all the way down. Now you may see some other differences between mine and She's Craftin's because I noticed she left out the border. She did a beautiful job of finishing her piece up on a sort of a quilted hanging, so she didn't need this border. Didn't even occur to me to leave it out. It's going to have back stitching with it too that's recommended in the kit. She left her little eye the same as the kit. I changed it. What I did was I took out the eyelashes, obviously. The eye is not done yet. He's going to have a little French knot, a little white French knot to show the reflection of his eye, her eye, its eye. And the thing that worried me that I got some advice from my sister on, because she's an artist, was leaving this part behind the eye white. I thought it would look like a gigantic eyeball, and that would be weird. And so with her advice, we changed the color to be the same as the light brown in his feathers, so that there's light brown behind his eye. It doesn't look like a big eyeball. Okay? And there's my progress so far on this inconsequential, unimportant little thing that I gave myself permission to start and do in between the trilobite getting finished and the birds of a feather frame arriving so that I could find out if the frames were any good. There is something I want to point out about this kit in case anyone else is doing it. And that is, good Lord, how long have I been doing this video? It's a long video. What I want to point out, I may not post it, it's so huge. What I want to point out is that they included a wrong color in this kit. As soon as I opened the package, it was really obvious that there was a floss in there that did not belong. It was nowhere in this picture. It was a really dark burgundy kind of color, claret, deep wine. Didn't belong anywhere in this piece. And at the same time, it was missing one of the colors needed for his breast. These colors they call coral and light coral. It only had one of them. So you couldn't really do this little bird's breast to make him a little red robin without those colors. So my first step was to go to the store that I got him and see if any other kits were still available. There was another one on clearance, and it clearly also was packaged with the wrong color. This deep, deep, dark cranberry, burgundy sort of color that didn't fit. It looked to me, by the way, that the way She's Craftin' got around that was to substitute it for her plum color, which is a pale purple in the flowers. She went ahead and used the dark color there. But I thought, no, I'm going to stick to the pale purple plum that it came with. I'm just going to discard this burgundy thing. But I've got to do something about his breast. So I went to the store wondering if, this is, by the way, an Artiste brand kit. That's what I meant by store brand, trashy floss and everything. Did they sell that color? It gave the numbers and everything. So I looked, and no, they did not sell. It was either 108 or 123. One was coral and one was light coral. They don't sell them by themselves. So I looked at their packages. Did they have a package with those colors in it? Not exactly, but they had one with a corally looking color that was lighter than the color that came with the kit. So I bought that package and brought it home and thought, yes, it's a nice contrast, but the problem is I think the coral that came with the kit is the light coral. So I would have light on light if I did that. That's not going to work. So instead, I broke out my trusty DMC color card, which I know I brought with me out here. And if I can find it for you, you're going to get a laugh out of how old this thing is, if I can locate it. I have had this card a million years. There it is. This is how many colors there were when I started stitching. Actual samples of all 390 solid colors, including the 30 newest colors. have 454 now if you haven't counted. This is old. But given the colors that are here, it's still good for figuring out that what I wanted to replace my little bird color with was 351. It looked like what came with the kit was pretty close to 352. There was 351. Looked in my stash. Nowhere could I find 351 in my stash. I thought I was going to have to go to the store to get one skein of floss just to finish a few stitches on this little kit that was supposedly on clearance and not important and shouldn't have had to have anything supplied for it. But I looked again. I have some boxes of floss, and one of them that I recently got because I had a coupon was the Home Decor color set from DMC. And yay, 351 was in the Home Decor color set. So now my little bird has the right color breast. Poor thing. Okay. So that's another one of my works in progress. May not be as pretty when it's done as she's crafting because I can't sew and I'm not going to be able to frame it the way she did hers or anything. But it's coming along, and I will change his little eye. As I said, he'll have a little white French knot in that eye to kind of give it the highlight it needs, and it'll be a nice normal size eye, and it won't have any eyelashes that birds don't really have. So he's coming along. And the last one I have, kind of last but not least, because if I have wasted your time, I really apologize, but I actually thought this very last part would be useful. It would have been useful to me to find something like this. And that is a chart that's from a company called Orenco. You may have seen them online. They sell at places like Amazon. And they take, obviously, they use computers to generate their charts. They take classic prints and artworks that must be in the public domain and turn them into designs. But what they don't do anywhere that I can find is show you an actual stitched image of the final product. Even when you buy it, what you get is an image of the cover art. I mean, on the cover art, you get an image of the original print, not the cross-stitch piece. So here's one of the ones I kitted up. It's Orenco's White Rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. And they say that it will be 8 by 12. That's already a warning right there. How are you going to get a lot of detail on an 8 by 12 image of this? On 14 count fabric. Okay. What they did not say when I bought it, and I didn't realize until I was kitting it up and was very disappointed, was that this particular chart is simplified cross-stitch. If you look there, in the description it says 30 colors, and in the little box over here in capital letters, simplified. I had no idea until I was kitting it up and noticed all these other little symbols. Because when I ordered it, I think I ordered it from Amazon, it said there would be 48 colors. And there are indeed 48 symbols on this chart, but only 30 of them have color names and skein quantities. So that actually reduces the color diversity by greater than 50%, because 18 colors more than 30 is more than half again as many colors. Which means this is not going to look like it would look if it was a 48 color chart. Not remotely. But because I could not find any samples online of Orenco designs to help me in my buying decisions, the closest I could come was one of the reviewers was doing one of their Japanese designs and had inserted an image of his progress, and it was kind of sideways and tiny and hard to see, but it looked a lot like the original print, so I thought, well, that's not bad. If they're as close as that to the originals, maybe it's not going to be so terrible. I didn't know I was getting the 30 color. So I am disappointed about that. But I want you to see, in case you also are looking for Orencos, what I've got so far. Because maybe you've been considering those charts and you're wondering about them. This, of course, is only 30 colors, not 48. So it's going to be very limited. But that's what we have so far. Kind of cartoony looking. Not a whole lot like the original. Let me show you, if I can, side by side. Get him on the right side. So you can tell what we have so far. There's the bow. In the corner, a little bit of his shoulder of the little heraldic tabard that he's wearing. Some of the upper square on his tabard, the one with the little heart. Now, one thing you might be able to tell from this 30 color version is the hearts aren't hearts. They're flat on top. The really big hearts, I looked at the chart, are going to be heart-shaped. All the little hearts are sort of flat on top. But you you can kind of get some idea, if I put them together, of what an Orenco chart looks like. So he is my work in progress. I'm presuming if you had the 48 color chart, it would be a lot better, a lot more detailed. More confetti too, probably, but a lot more detail to be looked at. So that is my final work in progress. My Orenco guy, who I'm doing because floss was on sale. I had these Orenco charts and I was thinking of buying more, and I wanted to see what it would look like. I was so tired of waiting to see what an Orenco actually looks like. So disappointed as I was that they sold me a simplified design when they didn't advertise it as such. Like I said, they actually said it would be 48 colors. It's my own fault. I didn't return it because it took me too long to figure out that I'd gotten something other than what was advertised. But despite that, he's coming along, and he might actually be okay when he's done. I don't know. We'll see. So I had one more thing I wanted to show you. Lord, this is going to be a long video. I'm really sorry. I should have done it in parts. The last thing I wanted to show you had to do with that fabric I was waving around. I told you that that would come back later. It is apparel fabric, 40 count, I think. How do I know that? Well, I took an edge of it somewhere and put some stitching in and counted up to 1/2, because I could tell it was tiny. And there were 20 in an inch. That's an inch right there. If there's 20 in an inch, then that must be 40 count, because I'm doing 1/2. And the reason I was doing that was because I recently got, I told you the buying bug was out, 2 beautiful sampler pieces. And samplers are not my thing. At least they never used to be. Recently, though, I told you books are my thing. I started reading more about the history of needlework and embroidery, part of because of my resolution that's driving me to stitch more. And I bought a bunch of books, and I have read some of them, not others. But for example, I read this one. It's Time Life, way too shiny there, called The Needle Arts. This far more fascinating one called Plain and Fancy, American Women in Their Needlework, 1700 to 1850. That was really interesting. Sorry they're so shiny. And this little one on samplers in museums in Glasgow. These are all great books. I have more. Those are the ones I actually read so far. And suddenly that helped me get a little more appreciation for samplers, what they were all about. And so after seeing another floss tuber, sorry I don't remember which one, she was, I think it's the one who was sorting through a room that she had a lot of her stitchy stuff in, and she was, putting things to keep and toss and so on. It might be that one. There's definitely someone who didn't want to keep this because they couldn't find fabric for it. And that was the Dutch Beauty 1790. Finding a piece of fabric that's large enough is not a problem if you can buy apparel fabric by the yard. So, I have a giant piece of fabric that it will easily fit on. When I ordered it, I considered buying a large enough piece of fabric from the online site. It would have been $62 and change for a piece of fabric. I also, at the same time, ordered this one, and actually this is the one I'm planning to start and that I want your help with. It's from Heartstring Samplery. It is not the Dutch Beauty, it's a little smaller. It's actually almost the same height. Dutch Beauty is 390 high, this is 363 high. But Dutch Beauty is over 600 wide, and this is only 435 wide. And it's an interesting little piece. To get the fabric for that would have been another $62 and change. Whereas I got this lovely 40 count linen that I think will work just fine for samplers because it works for trilobites. For this was less than $20 for 2 yards. It was 40% off to start with, and I had a coupon for an additional 25% off regardless of whether it was on sale. And so it was at least half off at $16.99 a yard. So yeah, I got both yards for less than $20. And I'm happy with that. And I do want to start this one first, but I need your help. This is why I wanted to talk to you about it. I am not interested in making these samplers look old and icky. Yes, they want it to look authentic. If you're doing the Dutch Beauty, maybe you want it authentic. I don't see why it can't be on pretty new fabric and pretty new colors. I don't want to tea dye this thing. I don't want to use specialty silk threads that all have different colors in them. This is done with Weeks Dye Works, and Gentle Arts threads is the recommended ones. I don't want to do it with those. Hello again, Flosstube. My deepest apologies. Not just for the fact that part 1 of this cut off, but that it was so darn long. I never intended that. If you sat through that whole thing, thank you. You're amazing. But I don't want, if you did sit through it, I don't want to leave you hanging wondering, what was she about to ask? Okay, so I'll tell you that here, and I will make it as short as I can. If you watched my first video, you know that I was just at the conclusion and showing you this sampler that I had purchased and beginning to talk about the colors of it and looking for some advice from you. The thing is that I don't think a sampler has to look really old. I think that when they were made, when they were new, samplers were bright colors, clean cloth, lovely looking. It's just that we've gotten used to seeing them a little more antiqued, as it were, because of the time passing, and that they haven't all been looked after equally well, and the light has faded some of the colors and so on. So if a designer like this one wants to make theirs look antique, that's perfectly understandable. I just don't think I want to make mine look antique. I want to do it with lovely, bright, fresh, new colors. And I need a little help with that for 2 reasons. One being that I have no access to the actual threads that are recommended here. It calls for Weeks Dye Works and Gentle Arts, and I don't have a store with those. I mean, Walmart doesn't carry that, and you may have seen me waving a Joanne bag around, so you know that that's a store that's available to me. I actually got that probably 80 miles away, but they don't have those dyes. Really, I need something to convert them to. And so I went online. It is easy to find conversion charts, and I found a DMC conversion chart, but some of the colors are too new. This chart, which they describe as being an Adam and Eve sampler, but what is actually going on there is there's a lot of animals that I like. Yes, Adam and Eve are in the picture, but there are pairs of animals that are somehow symmetrical but not the same color scheme and such on each side, and I just thought they were kind of interesting looking. If I'm going to do something that looks like a sampler, this seemed very appealing. But it is new. It's from 2014, I believe, and so some of the colors are not in the online color charts. To be specific, Weeks Dye Works number 1229 Chickpea, which to me looked like sort of a dirty broom straw color, if I can judge by the visual clip of it online at 123 Stitch, is not in any of the conversion charts, nor is Weeks Dye Works 2197 Oscar. They call for a couple of skeins of that. It looked to me like kind of a seaweed green. I don't live anywhere near seaweed. I don't know what seaweed actually looks like, but to my brain it looked like seaweed green. I would love to be able to know what the DMC equivalents of those two are. So if anyone has done a conversion, I realize that some of these threads are variegated, so there isn't a single color that it converts to, but I would be interested to know what colors you would recommend. Also, they use Gentle Arts threads, and in some cases there's an overlap in the color. The Weeks Dye Works thread 1230 is called for, and the conversion charts say you can do that with DMC 869, but the Gentle Arts tarnished gold, they also recommend doing with DMC 869. Since the artist charted it with both colors, she obviously intended them to be different than one another, and so if I do them both in 869, that's not good. If you had to differentiate between 1230 Havana Weeks Dye Works and 0410 Tarnished Gold Gentle Arts, what do you think you would recommend? Now, I don't know if anyone's actually going to see this video. I don't know if I'm going to get it successfully uploaded. I don't know when you'll get around to answering my question, but I'm not starting that chart right away. You saw I have plenty of other things to work on. I just really would like the information so that I can use that as a starting point. There were 2 other new colors in the Gentle Arts, 0511 Country Redwood and 0590 Terracotta, that were not in any of the conversion charts I could find, and the closest I could come was a chart that actually listed them but gave no conversion color. So again, I looked online at images, and my best guess was that the Country Redwood was kind of a very dark brick red. except that it had flecks of yellow or gold in it, all through it, as if it was a two-color thread. Mostly the dark brick red, but with these little flecks, and I don't know how you duplicate that. Maybe you just duplicate the dark brick red color. And the terracotta, well, I won't even tell you what that looked like to me, sort of like a chocolate milk with something to make it pinker. I don't know what to turn those to in terms of DMC, but I don't even want to stop there. I was saying, before I got very rightfully cut off because I babbled too long, that I would like them in bright colors. My plan is a two-step process, whereby I find out what DMC color they recommend in the conversion, and then I use my beautiful million-year-old thread card that I showed you. It seems that DMC does have their own site now, where they have newer cards with real thread. I need to look into that, but it's not that urgent for me to spend my money to do that now. I would use my color card to look for a brighter, more modern equivalent of the same color. So for example, if I did find something that looked to me like that old seaweed green, my idea would be to jump up to something brighter, not quite as faded and old and museum quality looking, but more like it would have looked to the original stitchers of samplers back in the day. I think they would have been thrilled at the hundreds of synthetic dye choices we have now. They didn't have that back then. Again, in my reading, I told you I'm a book person, I came across an e-book that was about embroidery in early America, and I got about 98 e-pages into it. I don't know how much that would be in the equivalent of real pages. And I remember somewhere in that she was talking about how the settlers had to come up with their own dyes for their threads, and would get excited by things like little Timmy came home today from playing in the woods with a new interesting grass stain on his breeches. Where did he get that stain? Not how am I going to clean it up, but where in the world did you get that? I want to replicate that for my dyeing. And so I think they would have loved all the colors we have, and I want to go with newer, brighter, cheerfuler colors on this chart. No offense to the designer, but I'd like to try that. So without a starting point, I can't jump up to a new color. If any of you Flosstubers out there have some conversions for the Weeks Dye Works or the Gentle Arts for those new colors, the chickpea, the Oscar, the country redwood, or the terracotta, I would love to know what DMC colors you think look most like those. And then on my own, I can look at this and try to make the upgraded colors. Or maybe you have ideas for that too. But if you do ever get a look at this video, if you do sit through the whole thing, if you do watch this little conclusion, I'd be happy if any of you could help out with that. It would be nice. And if not, I'll perfectly understand, believe me. So thank you to anyone who sat through this whole thing. You are wonderful, patient people. I hope that it served its purpose of providing some diversion for people while they're stitching. That's really the reason I did it. It's nice maybe to get a little validation for one's work if someone wants to say, oh, that's lovely. Well, thank you. That's nice to hear. I don't know that I have to hear it. It's much better to hear than that's hideous. But really, the main reason for doing this, if it is in part to put my work out there, it's not to put me out there. You can tell I'm not interested in putting me out there. I might be interested in putting my work out there. But I'm doing this so that you have something to watch and listen to while you stitch, because you other Flosstubers have done so much for me in that regard. I get to turn on your videos and I get to enjoy them, and it's really nice to do that and to know that not everybody out there is average age 56 and dying out. That yes, there are old folks like me and others, but there's young folks too, and you're all stitching and you all love the craft, and some of you have just come to it and some of you have been doing it far longer than I have, and most of you are much better at it than I am, but it's really nice to see what you're doing and what you're working on. And thank you for that. And thank you for watching, and thank you if you're able to give any comments that help me with that color search. And if I ever do another video, I promise it won't be as long as that first one. Have a wonderful day.